Well, good afternoon. It's really an honor to be here with all of you today, and I am especially honored to be here with President Bill Clinton. In spite of the fact that our distinguished speaker today has done such extraordinary things for the United States and for the world, I'm going to try my best to put it succinctly, but it won't be easy, to keep what could be a long introduction brief, because I really know that you're here to see President Clinton and not me. If you would allow me just a few minutes, I would like to recognize the truly outstanding and sustained leadership that President Bill Clinton has shown in our fight against AIDS and tuberculosis. I had the honor of working with President Clinton in 1987 at the Office of the National AIDS Policy Director during Sandy Thurman's period, an office that was founded by President Clinton in 1993. It was created to address the AIDS crisis. As president, he responded aggressively to this crisis, scaling up attention to research, prevention, and treatment. He convened the first ever White House conference on HIV and AIDS in December 1985, released the first national AIDS strategy in December 1986, and prepared the first federal biomedical research plan for HIV/AIDS in 1997. Overall funding for AIDS-related programs within Health and Human Services within the United States increased by 156% during his administration. And President Clinton directed the Department of Justice to vigorously prosecute any employers or healthcare facilities that discriminated against people with HIV/AIDS. President Clinton's leadership made significant strides to curb the epidemic with the aggressive implementation of the Ryan White Care Act in the United States. From 1995 to 1990-10, he then instructed me to add a supplement in the Minority AIDS Initiative that dropped more than 70% of the new infections in the country, and in 1995, the AIDS cases fell off the list of the top 15 causes of death in the United States. After leaving office, President Clinton did not stop. He continued his work to fight the epidemic, but on a global scale. At the International AIDS Conference in Barcelona in 2002, Nelson Mandela asked him to help millions of HIV-positive people in developing nations who were unable to afford life-saving medication. President Clinton garnered international support and agreements with his personal relationships, also engaged with pharmaceutical companies in a way that they had never before been, that led to a dramatic shift from only 50,000 individuals in sub-Saharan Africa on antiretroviral therapy and only 200,000 globally in the developing world on treatment in 2002, now approaching over 20 million people today. That cost of these HIV treatments has dropped dramatically because of these partnerships, and in most cases, more than 85 to 90%. Truly a remarkable achievement that keeps on giving. When you think of the lives touched and the lives saved because of that, the families stabilized, the communities stabilized, and the country stabilized, it is truly humbling. These efforts, which continue today through the now independent Clinton Health Access Initiative, also known as CHI, have reached millions of people and saved lives. On the TB front, CHI has been a leader in working with countries to address pediatric tuberculosis along with HIV expansion, and is also working closely with the Ministries of Health in 7 focus countries to improve national responses addressing challenges with multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. And that really is just the tip of the iceberg. President Clinton is known for so many accomplishments that I almost feel his dedication to global health really got lost in his narrative. 8 years during his presidency, he had many specific attempts to supplement, augment, change, and intensify relationships that the United States government had that could better identify partnerships that brought more people into care and treatment. But for those of us who knew firsthand of his dedication and his passion to improve the health of all people around the world, his contribution to global health will not be lost. It is now my distinct honor to introduce you to President Bill Clinton, a friend and the President of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to Eric Gooseby for his long ago beginnings in the fight against HIV/AIDS as a clinician in San Francisco in the 1980s, to his work in our administration, to his service on the board of the Clinton Foundation. What is it?
We demand for decriminalization of sex work worldwide and in the United States. We demand a repeal of SESTA FOSTA, which is killing sex workers around the world. We know you have the power still to do this.
As a black trans woman doing this work, fighting for sex workers, we demand safe housing. We demand the repeal of SESTA and FOSTA. We demand respect. We demand to have 2020 not in San Francisco. We deserve to see our brothers and sisters from all over the world. I'd like you as the president, please do something
you support
for
sex
us.
Workers. We know you support sex workers. Please help us. This law is killing us. SESTA FOSTA is killing us. 13 girls have gone missing in the United States already. 3 are dead, and we're being assaulted every day, and we're not included in the conversations.
The conference in 2020 should be moved out of the United States, and drug users from around the world join these with sex workers here with this demand.
Decriminalize sex work now. Every country that's here, we need decriminalization. When you decriminalize sex work, you decrease HIV by 50%! By 50%! If you want to decrease HIV, then decriminalize sex work. The Lancet shows that 50% of HIV prevalence goes down when you decriminalize sex work. Sex workers work. Give us our rights. Give us our labor rights. SESTA equals death. SESTA equals luck. Sex workers work. Sex workers work. Sex workers work. Stop killing us. Stop killing us. Stop killing us.
And even in Europe, we all are influenced by this bad situation in America. Please protect us. Last time you were on the conference in Vienna, we made a handshake, you and me. You are coming to our stand of the NGOs. Please, we need our help. Please.
The USA, you should be ashamed. You're ashamed for the whole HIV movement globally. Your laws are killing us all over the world regarding drug laws, sex work laws, your anti-prostitution pledge. Your policies are horrible. You are killing us, including in the USA. You are treating us like cheats, like criminals. You should be ashamed, and you should have a conference in the USA. You have travel restriction.
Thank you for listening to us.
Please allow the presenter to continue.
Do we know which text we're supposed to say? We're supposed to tell them that they're free to protest and we start again. Which line?
Please allow the presenter to continue. Please allow the presenter to continue.
First of all, I'd like to commend the conference on allowing people who come here with a grievance, a concern, the right to be heard. Not everybody can be scheduled on a program. I think it's important. So, Dr. Becker, Dr. Rice, Owen, Ryan, thank you for doing that. I also would like to say just one more word about Eric Goolsbee. I first heard about him in the 1980s when he was running an AIDS clinic in San Francisco. I know San Francisco is in the United States, and I know that a lot of you disagree with our government on a thing or two. Put me down in that category. But you should also know that for those of us who care about this issue in the United States, it is a sacred place. Many people died, and all the first battles were fought, and they died some more, and I'll never forget in 1984 when a distinguished American diplomat sneeringly referred to my party as the San Francisco Democrats because we wanted to stop the death. So I think when you get there, you'll be glad they held a conference in San Francisco. I also want to thank the people who have worked with me these last now 17 years through CHI, beginning, as Eric said, with the idea being planted when Mandela and I closed the AIDS conference in Barcelona in 2002. We could not have done this work without the support of DFID, UNITAID, the governments of Sweden, Norway, Ireland, the Gates Foundation, ELMA, IKEA, Susan Buffett, Elton John, the Gavi Alliance, the Global Fund, the World Bank, and so many others. I say this to make a larger point. The whole fight against AIDS worldwide and against tuberculosis, the current effort to reconcile the need to deal with non-communicable diseases without abandoning our efforts. All of these things represent remarkable partnerships. There has been no Brexit in the war against HIV and AIDS. And I've got several things I want to say today, most of which will be painfully obvious and which are known to many of you better than to me. But there was an article written just a couple of days ago by Laurie Garrett, who generally always reminds us of the dark side of this struggle we're in. It made me want to just say this. The most important thing I have to say is, through a combination of complacency in some places and outright hostility to global multinational cooperative efforts in others, there is a serious risk that many people will say, let's quit doing this, or let's ease off, or let's go spend time on non-communicable diseases, or any other, I can think of 10 other reasons. There is always a reason to abandon or reduce your efforts in a cause in which you have been involved, in which total victory has not been achieved. That would be calamitous here. As all of you know, there's been a significant, statistically significant anyway, increase in the number of new infections which are resistant to dolutegravir and the lowest cost medicines. So what are we supposed to do? Well, the same principles which drove down the price of first-line AIDS drugs will drive down the next group if you get the volume up and you do all the work that has been done. So if you don't remember anything else I say, don't let anybody get complacent. Don't let anybody think that we don't have to continue to increase our efforts. Don't let anybody believe that the only way to deal with non-communicable diseases in difficult settings is to cut back on what we're doing with HIV/AIDS and with tuberculosis in particular. This is just something that we have to face. I realized I talked to two people on the plane coming here who were working on the plane. And they said, where are you going? Why are you going to Amsterdam? I said, I'm going to the AIDS conference. He said, thank God, all the people we live around have quit worrying about it, including people who are in at-risk populations. Try to think of something you can say. And so I'll start at the end and say that. The most important thing is there can be no Brexit in the fight against AIDS, and you don't want to forget it.
It's not safe for sex workers. It's not safe for
I don't know what the question is. I know you. I don't know what the question is. I do know this. It was explained to me that under the rules of this meeting, you would be given a couple of minutes at the beginning to protest, and I would celebrate it, and I agree with that. And like often happens, you think we should follow the rules, but you shouldn't. So I don't know what the question is. I don't know what the question is. And I don't know, but all I can do is you've made an assertion here, which I have no reason to disbelieve, but I don't know.
Please allow the presenter to continue. Please allow the presenter to continue.
What do you say? We're going to try again? Here's what I think we should think about. And I'm going to try to give you all your time back, so I just cut off the first part of the speech. The number of people on treatment is higher than ever before. The number of people who have... Thank you. I think some attention should be given to the other victims of HIV and AIDS and the other victims of tuberculosis. And I've already explained I am not in a decision-making process here. I will, if you will send me a note, tell me what you want me to look into, I will. I don't know what you're saying, and I can't give this whole convention over to this. I'm sorry, I don't know. Believe me, I wish I knew everything. And the older I get, the more I wish it, and the more I realize it is not ever going to happen.
Please allow the presenter to continue.
So let's give him a hand. Thank him for giving the conference back to me. I think where we are today, with all of you know the positive numbers, and I think that we all know there are serious efforts being made to meet the UNAIDS targets, the 90-90-90 targets, the 2015 WHO recommendations. The majority of countries are going forward with test and treat policies. But the recently announced results in Eswatini, the country formerly known as Swaziland, basically give us a glimpse of why we should be optimistic and why we should be sober of what we're up against. It has the highest HIV burden in the world now at 26%. We started working there at CHIA several years ago, and in 2011, when we received funding from the Dutch Postcode Lottery's Dream Fund, we realized we had a long way to go. But the Minister of Health had set up an ambitious agenda, and we all got after it. Now, what do we know now? We know that there's still more we can do. Thanks to the partnership we had with AIDS Fund, the country committed to overcome the gaps in the system, to eliminate barriers to reaching everyone who needed treatment and testing. We put together a consortium called MaxArt, combining global and local networks of people living with HIV and research institutions and NGOs. In the first 3 years, more than double the number of people being tested, almost double the number of people on ARTs, and reduce the loss to follow-up ratio of clients by about a third. The government then, with the support of partners on the ground, in the next couple of years, had managed to reduce the rate of new infections by 44%. Now, when you get numbers like that, you think, well, we just need to do more of that. And there is some truth to that. But the level of optimism that I have seen in some places also overlooks some of the basic facts we face. For example, someone becomes infected every 3 minutes. The number of people with new infections has been going down, but held steady in 2017. 1.8 million, that's a big number. And the growing demographics, more young people, especially in Africa, and the growing rate of infections in Eastern Europe and Central Asia mean that these numbers are going to get bigger. The gender inequalities are pretty breathtaking for new infections, and the burdens on women and girls are going to require special efforts to be addressed. 940,000 people died of age-related illnesses last year, and if that trend is continuing this year, that means approximately 35 people will die while I'm up here talking. Therefore, it's important not to let anybody suggest that we should basically engage in too much self-congratulations or relax. There are more than 15 million people still living with HIV not on treatment. 25% of those don't know their status. Even in high-income countries, we have problems. 15% of the 1.2 million Americans living with HIV don't know their status. And as I said earlier, there are new strands appearing all the time in this malicious, devilishly clever virus resistant to the remarkable progress that has been made in cutting the price and increasing the volume and availability of dolutegravir. So, what are we going to do? First, we need to test more, treat more, and deploy more prevention strategies, and scale up what we know is working. There are still too many young people, especially, not being reached. There's still too many people who aren't using the best data to target their efforts and to monitor results. We at CHI have done a lot of work trying to get the right technology out there, but a lot needs still to be done. Second, we have to continue our efforts to reduce the level of mortality, to increase viral suppression, to use better regimens for young children who still don't have access. I'm very grateful that the agreement was reached between CHI and dolutegravir to make this medicine available for $75 a year with fewer side effects. I'm very grateful that Unitaid helped us to do a partnership with ViiV Healthcare to speed the development of pediatric formulations. And I'm very grateful that thanks to DFID, MedAccess, Unitaid, we made an agreement with Hologic to expand access to viral load price at lower cost, to expanding access to this critical test. We got to do all these things. But we also have to take the things that are working now and make them universal. You have made remarkable progress in reducing mother-to-child transmission, but we ought to be at 100%. And as the people who spoke here a few minutes ago remind us, there are still areas of this challenge that aren't really being addressed. We've got to do more to increase voluntary male circumcision. It makes a big difference in what happens. And I believe we have to fight for more oral PrEP and continued development of promising tools like long-acting injectable PrEP. I think it is important. I must say I've been somewhat perplexed at the opposition to this. And it's part of the swirling attempt to relitigate all these questions of sexual orientation and sexual identity in the context of the new politics of division that are sweeping the world. All I know is the only really pro-life answer is to save as many lives as possible by treating all these issues as public health issues. And so we have given a lot of thought to the importance of being steadfast, opposing discriminatory policies that will take us back, like those recently in East Africa that make it harder for the LGBTQ communities to access prevention, testing, and treatment. And we got to protect the activists who are out there putting their necks on the line to do this. It is, I will say again, if you believe in free speech, you believe in democratic government, you have to face the fact that there will be action and reaction and progress and retrogression. But you have to argue that when people tell you they sanctify life, the test is save as many lives as possible. This is always going to be a public health challenge. You can have your debates on the side about what the political policies ought to be, but save as many lives as possible. I also think this is important to, in this conference should remind people that TB is still the largest killer of people with HIV. For all the progress we've made. So everything that can be done to increase screening, treatment, and prevention and deal with other advanced complications of HIV should be done, particularly with regard to children who are so very vulnerable to tuberculosis. We're going to have to keep working to get new TB drugs as well. So I'm very hopeful that in just a couple of months, at the first high-level meeting on TB at the UN, we'll be able to make progress, and for obvious reasons, I hope President Modi will go, or Prime Minister Modi will go, and I hope other leaders will go as well. I want to say one other thing about this. I'm glad that there are people who haven't lost their passion for dealing with these issues. But I think it's important to remember I'm in the Netherlands, so I have to say something about two issues. First, in all the years we've been working on AIDS, we have had two people lose their lives in service. Both were Dutch. Both were nurses. In 2006, in Lesotho, Samuel Verwey was shot and killed. We still believe it was a case of mistaken identity, but she lost her life just the same. In 2013, a young woman who had just gotten her doctorate in public health and was about to deliver her first child, Elifly Foods, was killed when her partner in the mall terror attack in Nairobi, Kenya. I think it's important as we argue vociferously about what the way forward is to remember at the core the people who do this work are motivated and often prepared to make extraordinary sacrifices by the desire to save lives. I was so glad on the way in that someone gave me a remembrance of the continued honoring of the memory of Yup Long, his partner, Jacqueline Van Tongeren, and the people who were killed on that flight 4 years ago on their way to Melbourne. I also want to say a final word of thanks to the Dutch postcode lottery. The Dutch can be very proud. It is now the third largest donor to non-governmental causes in the world. You know, I've kind of gotten used to the Dutch humiliating America in the ice skating races every 4 years at the Olympics. And I love having something to say that 100% of the world ought to be proud of. The postcode lottery invests all its own profits back into worthy causes in the Netherlands and then around the world. And I wanted to mention them last because, number one, we've worked with them for so many years, but also because it's important that the people of the Netherlands be praised for keeping in their DNA a concern for the problems of global interdependence for people beyond their borders. And important that we all remember this. There is so much still to be done. I had originally had another laundry list of things that I thought I would mention, but it's not as important as a lot of you know this better than me. The thing I'm most worried about is that there are too many people in too many places who are so comfortable they think the battle is over where they live. And so there's not enough testing and not enough basic public health preventions. Even in the wealthiest settings, people think it's over. There are too many young people who are not used to living with the imminent threat of death, so they think it's over. There is political debate all over the world today, spawning out of this tribal separatism that seems to have captured the imagination of so many people, that where they think, you know, well, we got to cut this because we got to give our people a tax cut, or we got to do this, that, or the other thing. So let's just get rid of all this funding, or at least back off, or certainly don't give them any more money. And then there are people who honestly believe that we have to deal with non-communicable diseases, which we do. And when we were rebuilding the health system with Partners in Health, and then Dr. Paul Farmer, who's here, who's also on the CHI board, we built a hospital in Rwanda after the genocide. It had the first cancer center in Central Africa. We're all for that. But if you think, anyone, that we can possibly bring the developing world to where we want them to be by abandoning the fight against HIV and AIDS and the collateral struggle against tuberculosis, you need to think again. Because the virus does mutate. There is no Brexit option that does not end badly for real people in these developing countries. And maybe in the developed world as well. I know it's hard to believe today, but it's almost certain, maybe not in my lifetime, but a good vaccine and a cure will be developed. That the developments in the human genome endeavor are exposing all kinds of possibilities. We may really learn how to change our bodies so they can deal with it in an autoimmune way, but we're not there yet. We have got to hold the line. And I promise you that if we do what some people want to do and walk away from this or cut back on this, the chances of a return to epidemic proportions that with breathtakingly negative consequences, the chances of that are big enough that it could derail any number of other health, economic, and social objectives in nation after nation after nation, and leave a littered landscape that the people who asked for it to be done will not have to live with the consequences of. I'm pleading with you, if you don't remember anything else I say, remember this. The easiest thing in the world to do when people are subject to distraction, they're torn up and upset, they're divided, they're fighting, and there are legitimate claims on our money and our time and our attention, it's just to ease up. And the consequences could be calamitous. If for no other reason than the simple biology of the way this virus has worked its way into our collective lives and taken so many of them. It's something you can't walk away from. So, I'll give you an example that's not in my notes. One of the first things I did after what was for me a heartbreaking election in 2016, within 48 hours, I called President George W. Bush. And I asked him, I told him, I said, the best thing you did was PEPFAR. And they will come after it. And I said, they will come after it. And you can save it if you get the commitments now before anybody is thinking about it. So I know that a lot of you would like more money put into PEPFAR. I would too. But that's one, the fact that PEPFAR is still being funded at the level it is, that's something you owe him. I called him 2 days after the election, and he did that, and we can be grateful for that. And so I'm saying we have to remember that there are still millions of people like that around the world with different political orientations, different religious convictions, who still want this to be treated with the care, the love, the determination, and the fierce response it deserves. So for all of you who have helped Chi, and we got lots of people from Chi here, I'm very proud of them all. For all of you who have done what you're doing now, the number one takeaway has got to be that we now know how to virtually solve a number of problems. We can keep this thing at bay for an almost unlimited amount of time if we're prepared to spend the money, time, effort to do it. We can survive and continue to reduce deaths and continue to enhance lives until the day when we find a cure or a vaccine. But there can be no Brexit. This is not just about money and jobs. This is about life and death. I always think of the International AIDS Conference as a celebration of possibility. And I think every one of you are in the possibility business. Just a little over a week ago, in South Africa, they celebrated what would have been Mandela's 100th birthday. After we both got out of office, started working on AIDS and a number of other things together, I used to try to be with him around his birthday every year. And they are all memorable parts of my life. I still miss him all the time. But I keep these little nuggets with me. So one day I was talking to him and I said, you know, I know you're a great man and all, but you're also a very shrewd politician. And it was very shrewd for you not only to invite your jailers to your inauguration, but to put the leaders of the political parties who kept you in prison 27 years in your government. But come on, it's just the two of us. Tell me the truth. And this was when there was a studied effort to run me out of town in Washington when I asked him this question. So I said, tell me the truth. Now, when they let you out and you were walking to freedom, didn't you hate them all over again? He said, yeah, briefly. I did. That's great when you're out of office, you can say whatever you want. He said, I did, but he said, I realized if I still hated them, when I got in the car and drove out the gate, I would still be their prisoners. I wanted to be free, and so I let him go. And he said, wait. And he gave me that, and so should you look. But then I said to him, okay. But how did you get rid of the hatred? How? He said, well, I did it by focusing on the reasons I should hate them. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, look what they did to me. I was abused physically. I was abused psychologically. I didn't get to see my children grow up. I thought I was riddled with guilt for making a mess of being a father. In the end, it broke up my marriage. I had to sit helplessly in confinement while the people that I loved and had worked with were beaten and shot. He said it was awful. He said, I realized one day in a seething hatred, they could take everything from me. He said, except my mind and my heart. He said, now those things I would have to give away. I made the simple decision not to give them away. And then he looked at me and he said, and neither should you. And so you guys are in the possibility business. Have we made mistakes? Yes. Have we been disappointed? Of course. Are we better on some days than others? Yes. But you got to stay in that possibility business. In the end, all you've got that no one can take from you is your mind and your heart. Do not let the headlines, the madness, the craziness, short-sightedness, the rising tribalism. You know that everything that's unique about you is made more possible, not less, by believing that our common humanity is more important than our fascinating differences. You know that. So, however you can, to whatever extent you can, remind the people back home, wherever it is, that we can't walk away from this. There is no Brexit option that is not calamitous in dealing with HIV and AIDS. And when you get tired, think how tired Mandela must have been by year 11. And think how by hanging on, he lived to walk free, to live to be 95. And think if he would hear, he would remind you that there are no permanent victories or defeats in life. But there is a permanent attitude which will guarantee triumph or constant trial. So just suck it up and make something good happen. God bless you.
Looking back, over the last 30 years, even though sometimes we like to say we're quick out of the box, we're still way too slow. Because there's always this period where you say, please, tell me this is not my responsibility. And that delay is lethal.
We thought that we might have as many as 50 cases in a town of 100,000. So to have 50 drug-resistant cases per 100,000 essentially is an outbreak. The medicines for MDR-TB were really expensive, anywhere from $20,000 to as high as $35,000. And so the World Health Organization actually had an official policy on MDR-TB. They said it was too expensive and that they didn't think that MDR-TB should be treated in poor countries. We went to the local authorities and said, look, there's a lot of patients with drug-resistant TB. We should start treating them. We're going to have a huge problem on our hands unless we get going right now. I have to tell you, when I saw Melquiades, I thought, oh my goodness, I would not be surprised if he died.
El tratamiento consistía de más de 11 medicamentos que se tomaban los pacientes al día. A ver, Melquiades.
No tengo ganas de tomar más, porque no me siento bien conmigo mismo.
Estas medicinas tienen efectos secundarios fuertes, pero son los únicos medicamentos que pueden ayudarte a eliminar el bacilo resistente.
Tengo 3 años con medicina y nada. Nada, 3 años.
Our patients went through hell in getting treated.
No, Melquiades, más que el tema de tomar los medicamentos, sí, es un problema de desesperanza, ¿no? ¿Qué pasa?
The stakes were so high and we pushed very, very hard. We knew that we had to have success with these patients or treating MDR in the rest of the world be written off forever.
We have one more clip to play for you.
Fue una lucha en la que fue bien dura.
Wow.
Gracias al apoyo tanto de los doctores, tanto de
personas
que estuvieron ahí, se puede decir que estoy aquí.
We almost let him die. To think we almost let him die just because we thought it was inconvenient for us.
Se puede decir que es caro, ¿no? Que involucra mucho tiempo, cuesta todo eso, ¿no? Pero yo creo que lo vale, ya que más adelante se va a ver reflejado realmente en todas estas personas.